Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Millennial Project. Today I want to dive into our next set of Hollywood sign interviews. This set of interviews will be with public space advocates, and I think it will be the last set of interviews that I put up, at least for the time being. But I do think that these interviews with public space advocates will really be a great way to wrap up the project, to sort of contextualize how this Hollywood sign issue ties into larger issues of economic inequality and larger issues of privatization of public space, both in Los Angeles and around the rest of the country. So in today's interview, you will get to meet Alissa Walker. Alissa is a writer. She has written for a ton of really major publications in Los Angeles, including the LA Times, LA Weekly. She also has covered the Hollywood sign issue for sites like Gizmodo, and she has her own blog called A Walker in LA. More recently, and since we filmed the interview, Alissa has actually become the urbanism editor at Curbed, which is really exciting. And so she really is plugged into what's going on throughout the city and various urban issues, as well as the Hollywood sign issue more specifically. In addition to all that good stuff and all of her experience with the Hollywood sign issue, Alissa is also actually the first person that I reached out to when I started trying to cover this Hollywood sign issue. She was doing an event for an organization she started called deLaB, where everyone would basically meet at Griffith Observatory and then walk to the Hollywood sign. And then along the way, basically she had all of these different speakers come out and talk about various aspects of the sign issue and various solutions. And then at the end, everyone sort of got together and tried to workshop some solutions. It basically was the first step towards a kind of solutions-oriented workshopping approach like Brian Lane laid out in the last interview. So unfortunately, not a lot of Beachwood residents showed up except for Brian Lane and Tony Castaneras. But, you know, it was a good first step. It was a really interesting event, and it got me invested in this sign issue long term. So with all that in mind, I'm really excited to finally loop back around and talk with Alissa more about the sign issue. It's been a long time coming, and I think you will really enjoy this interview. But before we get started, I do just want to say very quickly that if you like what you see today, please do remember that you can stay up to date with the Millennial Project's latest videos by subscribing to the show on YouTube or liking the page on Facebook. Also, feel free to share what we're doing with your friends, your family, fellow activists, journalists, city council members, neighbors. The shares really help, the extra views really help, and I think especially with these more pro-access oriented interviews, it's really valuable to get these perspectives out there to tell the people who are writing articles and tell the city officials who are working on this issue that there is a way to solve it that does not involve shutting down access to the Hollywood sign, and that there is a contingent of people who don't want to see that access go away. All right, with all that out of the way, let's dive into our next Hollywood sign interview with Alissa Walker.
My name is Alissa Walker, and I'm one of the co-founders of deLaB Designista of La Brea, who organized the event, the March on the Hollywood sign, or whatever you want to call it. I'm also a writer, and I write for the site Gizmodo, where I wrote some stories about the Hollywood sign and how people were trying to keep others away from it.
So your stories are some of the most read on the Hollywood sign. I think it's how I found you. And how I got affiliated with the sign issue originally. What do you think the issue is? Kind of from like start to finish, how would you describe the issue to someone who's never heard about it before?
I think it's a typical thing that might be happening more in LA now that LA is becoming more of a public city with, we're standing in an alley here where, people are walking down the alley now to see art, where it used to be like people weren't used to people using sidewalks or weren't used to wanting to use the parks in the neighborhood, and now everybody's trying to get out and be on foot and explore their city a little bit more, and technology has actually enabled that thanks to our smartphones and GPS and apps and Instagram. So now people, if they see an awesome picture of the Hollywood sign, they want to go right exactly where it was taken. It's not just enough to, stand at the Hollywood and Highland Mall and get a really far shot. So, and then there's that level of adventure of just a lot more people are interested in exploring LA and getting out there and appreciating either their city or the city they're visiting.
So how does this turn into a problem for the homeowners in the Hollywood sign area?
Well, I mean, I sympathize with them. I used to live there. I used to live just one canyon over from where a lot of the biggest challenges are right now in Beachwood Canyon. I lived in Bronson Canyon right next door. And I can tell you what they're saying is true. Like, every single day when I'd be walking around my neighborhood when I lived in Hollywood, people would be asking for directions to the sign, standing in the middle of the street, trying to take pictures, getting lost, ending up on dead ends, which there are many of them. So I am definitely sympathetic, but I also think that these are public trails in a public park, one of the largest urban parks in the country, and there's no reason why there shouldn't be complete access for anyone at any time to walk and get up there. The problem is cars, of course, parking, and then there's no really good labeling of the path, or even on Google Maps or any other place itself. It's in a real and virtual sense, there's not any good wayfinding to help people to find the sign.
And so when you say wayfinding, you mean like signage, like
Yeah.
Hollywood sign, 0.2 miles this way?
Exactly, like a map, an arrow, and then some kind of, it's something that would help you guide there, or at least warn people that they should have water and safe shoes, because we're going through some pretty treacherous terrain when you get up there.
Right, you can't like climb up to the Hollywood sign in high heels.
And people
right?
do, like, you should see these people, like, you've seen them, like, some of these people are wearing like flip-flops and, or like some kind of platform heel, and they just think they can just stroll on up there. So we need, it's a safety issue, and I agree with that.
So where do you see kind of there being this valid safety issue, and then that kind of being put aside and things getting a little out of hand in the area surrounding the issue?
I think people who are trying to get the streets closed, the public streets closed, is a really big problem. That's like my first concern. So there are roads up there that some of the neighbors are putting fake signage up to tell people that streets are actually closed when they're not, or that this is not the way to the Hollywood sign. They're maybe using some equipment borrowed from the local streets bureaus to kind of block the streets physically from people from going up there. That's not cool. Like, you can't block a public street, or if I want to walk by your house and admire the gorgeous architecture of your house on the way to the Hollywood sign, I should be able to do that. So that's one thing that is troubling. I think the other thing is this idea that in some way those park entrances might be closed, or that Hollywood sign access would be restricted in some way. This is one of the most famous landmarks maybe on the planet. Like, people come from all over the world to see it, and to say that you can only get so close when there's this beautiful urban mountain that you can climb in the middle of LA, that's not going to work either. This is a public park, and access should be completely not just not restricted, it should be improved.
So you've done a lot of work in the area and in the city surrounding various issues and various problems, but you've done a lot of work on this specific Hollywood sign issue as well. Do you mind talking a little bit about your organization and what
Sure.
you've done to try and actually find a solution to this
Well,
crazy thing?
We're trying, yeah. So Design East of La Brea was started to just get people out originally into certain parts of the city that they might not have seen, and see some of the design contributions that have been made by local architects, artists, designers that improve the city. And we focus on east of La Brea just because it's fun to draw a line through the middle of the city and have everybody, complain and debate about it. But mostly because we just thought like the east side of LA wasn't getting the recognition that it deserved. This was like 7 or 8 years ago. Now the east side is like the cool side. But so a new set of programming that we started that has an NEA grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. It's called Making LA, and what this is really focusing on is how designers and architects can solve problems that are found in LA. And one of the biggest problems that I'm tackling is transportation. So this fits very nicely into transportation because it's not only about guaranteeing pedestrian access to some of our most valuable landmarks and historical locations, but it's also about the huge car problem in Griffith Park. So we wanted to be a part of the solution, kind of like in a three-part way. The event that we organized was, first of all, to show that it was possible and easy to hike to the Hollywood sign, and that should not be restricted in any way. And Griffith Park people were super supportive of that and helpful. But then we actually found some neighbors who lived in Beachwood and in other neighborhoods around the Hollywood sign that were actually really sympathetic to what we were trying to do and saying we're not neighbors that are trying to keep people out. So they also wanted our help to create maybe some of that wayfinding signage that could help direct people into the park the right way, maybe to help come up with some better ways to tell tourists just about the distance and where they should go. And then the bigger idea is how do we just not bring so many cars, not only up into the streets around the Hollywood sign, but also into the park itself.
So this sounds like it really is an issue that is not specifically in Beachwood, but it's about increasing tourism levels. It's about everyone renting cars and trying to go to the Hollywood side and not being able to find their way.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a
stuff.
bigger LA tourism. And you'd think that like the city would really step up and ensure that this is something that could be fixed, because a lot of the people who are coming to visit LA, that's one of the first places, or maybe the only place they're trying to get to. They want to get to Hollywood. They want to see that sign. Maybe they want to go to Rodeo Drive or something. I mean, the city, for what it's worth, has rolled out like an app, to try to help people get around without a car. They've done a lot of like car-free itineraries and stuff, but several groups have purposely suppressed information about where to go to see the Hollywood sign, where you can take those awesome pictures, the fact that you can walk to a lot of these areas instead of driving around. So I think that the relationship of the city with the Hollywood sign has to change, because people are going to be renting a million cars. People are going to be taking Ubers and Lyfts. People are going to be wanting to get the selfie. People are, there's just too much. People have too many tools at their disposal to get up there. So we need to change the way that it works for like modern society.
So what do you think is the solution?
I mean, it's definitely a complicated solution. I don't know the answer. I'll tell you the solution that I want as somebody who lives here, who used to live close to the sign and who wants to go hike there, whatever. I want a car-free way to get as close as possible. So the shuttle buses that the park is proposing right now, that kind of mimic something like you would see in a national park, where you can hop on, hop off. Like I can hop on down here, hike where I need to, jump on when I'm tired, do another bus, and get down to the local subway station or another bus to connect me to get home. That's the first and most important thing, just to get the cars out of the area, out of the neighborhoods. While I do want to see some restriction on the cars that are going up into these neighborhoods, I don't think we need to close any roads or close any sidewalks. Maybe restrict the parking very heavily up there, just so people aren't leaving their cars in dangerous places or putting them in people's driveways. That's fine. I'm cool with that. And then, more facilities for people who are up there, more amenities. So we're talking about bathrooms, water. I think the fear for a lot of people is that if you add too many, things that allow people, that say it's okay to come there, that more people will come there. But I don't think that's a worry. I think we need to keep the people who are there safe and hydrated.
Well, and it is a little bit sad when you see people who have traveled thousands of miles to see the Hollywood sign and they're at Griffith Observatory with their iPhones, and the picture they're getting is like you can barely even read the letters in the background.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, I really feel for those people. Like I've met a lot of those people walking around Griffith Park or walking around the neighborhoods, walking even in Hollywood, like on Hollywood Boulevard. People are standing on Hollywood Boulevard and asking, like, how do I get to the Hollywood sign? I don't understand. Where is it? Like, they just have this perception it was right there. So I really think there's got to be, maybe there's a shuttle bus that comes right from, Hollywood Boulevard, takes you up to the sign. It's just constantly rolling. Or I've always liked the idea of a gondola, which is something that we talked about at the deLaB event. So I think there's a lot that we can do to fix this problem and make people's experience of visiting LA better. And then giving us a really great way to experience one of the best hikes of the city.
Well, and I think it's really cool because I think your event, instead of assuming that we should build like a visitor center with buses, which is an idea that like I've asked people about a bunch of times in interviews, I think the cool thing about your event was that you guys were like, what is your reflection? What's your idea? Like, let's see what's your experience, etc. So can you tell us a little bit about, what solutions you may have kind of workshopped at the event and how the event itself kind of worked?
Yeah, I think what was cool was that we got a lot of people just thinking and talking about it. We had a lot of speakers there who talked about their relationship to the sign or to Griffith Park and what they thought some of the challenges were and some potential solutions. And so that was great. And then at the end, we had this big map that we had made of the park, and we had access points kind of marked on there. And we just let people take markers and just doodle all over it and put where they thought bathrooms should be, or where there should be another trail, or where the gondola or zip line, I think was what somebody else was joking about, that should be. And I think like any ideas are good ideas. It's not like we should be throwing anything away at this point. But some of the most basic things were just, what people ask for, like, why aren't there restrooms? Why aren't there drinking fountains? Why isn't there better signage? And that stuff is pretty easy. It's not, super expensive. Neither is like a really solid shuttle service that can just get, those people circulating up there.
So the one kind of last thing I wanted to ask you about was just your experience covering this as a writer. I know that you've, again, written a lot with Gizmodo, and you've had a lot of people from the community reach out to you with different reactions. Do you mind kind of telling us a little bit about that?
It actually started when I wrote years and years ago, maybe 5 or so years ago, when there was first a lot of these stories coming out about neighbors who were purposely creating fake signs or blocking streets, or I've seen people like lie to tourists and be like, no, you can't get to the sign, and there are actually signs that say like you can't get to the sign, which is not technically true. So once this, the word about this stuff started to get out, I wrote a very short post on my blog just kind of fixing the misinformation and saying, hey, we've got all these people who the first thing they probably Google when they come to town is like how to get to the Hollywood sign. And if you go online, there wasn't any good information. So I made like a step-by-step how to get there. You could go here, you could see this, you could look at this, whatever. And after that had gone up, some people contacted me, emailed me, and asked me to take my post down. They said that they did not want that information out and that the information was fake. Well, of course, that made me want to leave it up even more and maybe get the word out about it a little more. So the interesting part that I noticed a few years later, and that post actually still gets a lot of hits, like people are still looking at it and thanking me. About once a week somebody thanks me or tags me in a photo and says thanks for posting accurate information about the sign, which I think is pretty funny. So then what I noticed a few years later, when there was a lot of talk about the trails being closed and to get to the Hollywood sign, I noticed that Google Maps was directing people not to where the sign actually was, but directing them to Griffith Observatory and like telling people they couldn't get any closer. And it was even like if you would be like right by if you would pick an address that was right by the Hollywood sign and ask how to walk to the Hollywood sign, it would direct you all the way to Griffith Observatory and then just be like, look over there, not even like a dashed line through the air. And actually, a lot of that has been corrected. I think maybe people are paying attention and kind of learning about the dangers of not letting not giving people accurate directions to where they want to be on foot. I think it's very clearly says like you can't drive, but here's how you can walk there, which is how it should be. But anyway, once I noticed that change, I was like, all right, now I got to write a post about how the maps are being misled. And I found out that the city, in some cases, have been working with some of these mapping companies, people like Garmin. I think that they had been advised, they had told Google, how they wanted the map to be changed to. And you could see this like weird, like, digital fence being put up around the Hollywood sign that was blocking people from getting the information. So that disturbed me, and that's what led to my next series of stories.
So we have talked a lot about public space and kind of about this issue being a larger issue, not just about specifically a person walking to the Hollywood sign, but about this issue of like there being people cutting off access. And how do you think this plays into like larger concerns about economic inequality, about people influencing policy in a way that excludes certain segments of the population, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, there's two really big issues going on right now in LA that are related to this. One is like the river, which is going through this big redevelopment process, and there's a lot of questions about whether it should be turned into more of a commercial corridor, whether more people should be allowed to build housing along the sides of it, whether it should remain very naturalized and they should try to turn it into more of a recreational area. So I think that that's like a very similar model, just looking at the way that Griffith Park started as this very wild place and might need to have a few more of those facilities to help it grow up into a truly great urban park. The other thing that's going on right now is along the ocean, where there's a lot of beaches with homeowners who are very similar to, they use very similar tactics to some of the Hollywood sign neighbors, which is fake signage, blocking some walkways that are public, telling people they can't park places, even hiring a fake security guard. Well, I guess they're not fake, but hiring people to act as security guards to tell people to stay away from certain beaches. And there was a really great solution there, an app that was created by Jenny Price and some other people that actually is a guide to like every single beach and where you can go and how you can access these beaches that are supposed to be, people are trying to close off. But that's an ongoing battle. I mean, there's been a lot of movements from very powerful people who want to restrict access to some of the coastal areas, and that just can't happen either. I mean, it's something that's going to keep happening in a lot of places, especially in LA, where there's powerful people who are trying to use parts of the city as their own backyards, which isn't fair. And then you look at other parts of the city, that are just completely starved when it comes to park and public space and green, just any kind of green area they can, get to. And so we need to be opening up more of the city, not closing it out.
I think that's all I have. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Do you have anything that you'd like to kind of add before we...
I don't think so. You did great. That was awesome.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate it.